Wow, it is so beautiful down here today. I can't believe it. It's fall. We're coming in to December. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving, and it's like almost 60 degrees outside here in Pittsburgh. So this video today is a story about Western Penitentiary. Some weeks ago, I put on my community page a poll asking if you guys wanted to hear stories about former inmates who I was homeless with in Pittsburgh that did time there. Well, you responded well, so I'm going to tell you one story, and depending on how this goes and what level and grade of reception that I get, I'm happy to share more because I have a lot of stories. I knew quite a few men who I was with in the shelters and men that I was affiliated with that had done rather extensive, serious stints there. So this one particular story comes from a man that I was with in Smithfield. Now, I'm not going to use his real name because I don't have his permission, and I haven't seen him in a number of years. Last I heard, before I left Pittsburgh, he was staying somewhere in the south side in Pittsburgh. I don't know where, but when I left Pittsburgh, that's where I was told he was at. He was staying there somewhere, but I do not know the exact location. But he was the one who told me this. So in Smithfield, that's the shelter that I stayed at. I was one of the shelters. That was the first shelter I stayed at, which was the worst one. But of course, at that time, I didn't know that. I didn't go to Smithfield on my own volition. I was sent there by the police. No, I didn't get arrested, but it's a long story, and maybe I'll say that for another time. But anyways, I got sent there by the police. So that's how I got into Smithfield. And it turns out that was a really bad place, but it was made up of a lot of different people. There were drug addicts in there, there were alcoholics in there were ex-convicts in there, there were mentally ill people in there. It was just an array of different individuals. And of course, at the time, when I was placed there, I had no idea. But eventually, of course, I learned. So one day, I'm going to call this man Jim. That's not his real name. But one day, Jim and I are walking. We're going to the north side, I think it was. And I don't know how the conversation even commenced, but I had made a statement about the Ohio River, which is what you're looking at right now. And I said, there's a lot of shit in this river. I said, the steel mills when they were in operation, dumped a lot of, chemicals and pollutants into the river. And then I said to him, I said, Western Penitentiary, which is on the Ohio River, I said, I heard a lot of bad stories about that place. And he sort of paused for a moment and he said, well, what did you hear? I said, I heard about, what the living conditions were like, the overcrowding, the fighting, the rapes, the sodomy, the terrible food, and etc. Just like, normal prison life. The prison is old. For those of you who live in California or somewhere and are watching my videos, Google Western Penitentiary of Pittsburgh, and you'll see it. It's an old prison. It's still there. It's still standing, but it's closed. It was built, I believe, in the very early 1800s. It housed Civil War prisoners at first. And some of the men that I became affiliated with told me it was one of the worst places in Pennsylvania to be incarcerated, simply because of its age. There was no air conditioning in the summer, so you boiled alive, and the heating wasn't very good, so you were pretty cold throughout much of the winter. And I told him what I briefly knew, which was not a lot. And like a lot of homeless people who are ex-convicts, they don't like to share their experiences of prison time, and there's a number of reasons for that. But in his particular case, we got to be fairly good friends, and he opened up to me. I guess he trusted me. I don't know. I don't know what it was. I honestly don't know. So I'm not going to give myself laurels because I really don't know why he told me the story that I'm about to tell you. But he proceeded to say one morning when we were eating breakfast. Now by this time, I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. At this time now, we're staying at a shelter on the north side. And we're at the breakfast table. And man, that truck scared the crap out of me. And he said, I'm going to tell you a little story about Western Penn. They called it the Wall. That's the nickname for it. And he said, I was a cook there. And one morning, he's preparing breakfast with a number of the other cooks, and the CO comes up to him, and the CO says, "Here, take this and dump this into the shit you're already making." That's exactly how he phrased it. And he said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Just do what I tell you to do, and don't breathe a word about this to the other inmates, or you're not going to live to tell about it." And it was a bag of chemical. He didn't know what it was. It had no label on it, and he dumped it into the food. After a while, things started to happen in that prison. This is he was there, I think, in the mid-70s to the early 80s. He did an extensive amount of time there. I'll tell you how much time he did after, if I remember to, before the video ends. But so he did this regularly every morning, dumping these unknown chemicals into the food and mixing it and giving it to the prisoners. And then he says to me, "Do you know, did you ever hear about the contamination of the prison?" And I said, "No." I said, I don't know what you're talking about." I said, now I had read a few articles. There's a lot of research that I've done on my own since I talked to him about this, and this is already going on 5 years now, so it's been a while. But I did my own research, and I never came up with anything that he was talking about. And he said, "Well," he said, "because of what you said earlier that time when we had our conversation," he said, "about the still mills, the water in that prison was heavily contaminated due to all the dumping by, the still mills in Pittsburgh. If you go to Point State Park, right where it's up there, where the fountain's at, those were all still mills there at one time. You can Google it and look at the old photos of Pittsburgh and still mills. They used to dump all their slag and crap and everything in that river, and it contaminated a lot of the water lines all along the river. And of course, Western Penitentiary was one of the biggest buildings on that river, and it was one of them. And he said the water was so bad in that place, he said when you turned on the spigots, it was brown, and he said it remained that way. It didn't matter how long you ran it. And he said prisoners were getting sick, and a huge breakout of dysentery occurred. Now, this is according to him. And he said they kept it out of the press because the right people had the right connections. The warden kept this story completely silent, and no one knew about it. And a lot of prisoners got sick. A lot of them were transferred, never seen again. And this went on for a long time. There's a lot more to this story. I can't get into it all. I'm going to tell you more about it. I'll probably make a second part to this video. But a lot of stuff started happening. An investigation was about to ensue, and that got stopped. There's a lot more to this story, guys. I'm going to tell you more about it, I promise. It's very interesting. Western Penitentiary has a lot of folklore, a lot of horror stories. There's a lot of reality, and there's a lot of fantasy. Before I close out, I will say that Jim ended up doing 15 years in that place. And like a lot of prisoners who have done that extensive amount of time, Jim had a lot of mental problems, but he was also a very talented human being. He was a very kind man. He was he was tough as nails. He was an old man. He was in his 60s at that time, 70s maybe. And, he'd beat you. He could beat you to a pulp. But he was a very nice guy. I enjoyed his company, and we hung out quite often. And we exchanged a lot of stories and ideas. So I will tell you more later about this. This is an ongoing story, an ongoing development. So I'm sorry to say that I have not seen him for a while. I don't know what's going on with him. I hope he's well. In closing, I would love to hear from someone who actually did time in Western Penitentiary in Pittsburgh. Leave a comment below this video. Get in contact with me. There's many options. You can get in contact with me through my YouTube channel. You can email me. You can go on my website and contact me. I would love to hear your story, and I'd be willing to share it. Either you being anonymous or me wishing to use your name. I will honor your requisition either way. Let me know your story. I would love to hear about it if you're willing to share it. And with that said, I want to wish everybody a very happy and safe Thanksgiving. And as a practicing Roman Eastern Catholic, gratitude is very big in my church. And I think you should focus on what you have instead of what you don't have. because if you think things can't get worse in your life, I can assure you they can, and I can take you to the city and prove it to you. So be grateful for what you have. As my grandfather once told me, the secret to a happy and fulfilling life is not getting what you want, but it's appreciating and being very gratified about what you already have. If you do not appreciate what you what you already have, you're never going to really figure out what you really want. Most people I talk to don't really know what they want. So with that said, guys, happy Thanksgiving. I can't wait to talk to you again. I will make another part to this video. Like, subscribe, let me know what you think about this, share your comments, and please don't forget to get involved in my community page on my YouTube channel. I post a lot of polls there and images, and I would love to hear your views when I ask questions. Okay, so stay safe, guys. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much turkey, and I'll see you in the next video. Look at all these barges coming. Isn't this great? What a great way to close out the video. Later.